大家好，现在我们讲新概念英语第四册的第21课啊。A man-made disease. In the early days of the settlement of Australia, enterprising settlers unwisely introduced the European rabbit. This rabbit had no natural enemies in the antipodes, so that so that it multiplied with that promiscuous abandon characteristic of abandon promiscuous sorry 这句话我重新念一遍。This rabbit had no natural enemies in the antipodes, so that it multiplied with that promiscuous abandon characteristic of rabbits. It overran a whole continent. It caused devastation by burrowing and by devouring the herbage, which might have maintained millions of sheep and cattle. Scientists discovered that this particular variety of rabbit, and apparently no other animal, was susceptible to a fatal virus disease, myxomatosis, by infecting animals and letting them loose in the burrows. Local epidemics of this disease could be created. Later, it was found that there was a type of mosquito which acted as the carrier of this disease and passed it on to the rabbits. So while the rest of the world was trying to get rid of mosquitoes, Australia was encouraging this one. It effectively spread the disease all over the continent and drastically reduced the rabbit population. It later became apparent that rabbits were developing a degree of resistance to this disease, so that the rabbit population was unlikely to be completely exterminated. There were hopes, however, that the problem of the rabbit would become manageable. Ironically, Europe, which had bequeathed the rabbit as a pest to Australia, acquired this man-made disease as a pestilence. A French physician decided to get rid of the wild rabbits on his own estate and introduced myxomatosis. It did not, however, remain within the confines of his estate. 这里应该是这样的啊。It spread through France, where wild rabbits are not generally regarded as a pest, but as a sport and a useful food supply. And it spread to Britain, where wild rabbits are regarded as a pest, but where domesticated rabbits, equally susceptible to the disease, are the basis of a profitable fur industry. The question became one of whether man could control the disease he had invented. 那么我们来看第一句啊。In the early days of the settlement of Australia, enterprising settlers unwisely introduced the European rabbit. 那么这句是简单句啊。后面 this rabbit had no natural enemies in the antipodes, so that it multiplied with that permissive abandonment characteristic of rabbits. 好，那么这一句呢，主句呢是 this rabbit had no natural enemy in the antipodes， 然后呢，这个呢后面一句是状语从句啊，以 so that 引导的结果状语从句啊。So that it multiplied with that promiscuous abandon characteristic of rabbits 啊，状语从句。It overran a whole continent， 这个是一句简单句啊。It caused devastation by burrowing and by devouring the herbage, which might have maintained millions of sheep and cattle 啊。那么 It caused the devastation by burrowing and by devouring herbage. 那么这个啊 ，which might have maintained millions of sheep and cattle. 这个是定语从句，这个 which 指这个 herbage 啊 ，herbage might have maintained millions of sheep and cattle 啊。然后 scientists discovered that this particular variety of rabbit and apparently no other than was susceptible to a fatal virus disease. 好，那么这里呢有一句宾语从句啊，这个最后这个到最后啊，这个 that 啊引导的这个是宾语从句啊，这个宾语从句做这个 discover 的宾语的啊 ，discover this particular rabbit and apparently no other was susceptible to a fatal virus disease myxomatosis 啊，那么后面 by infecting animals and letting them loose in the burrows, local epidemics 啊。Local epidemics of this disease could be created 啊，这个是一句简单句啊，这是简单句。Later, it was found that there was a type of mosquito which acted as the carrier of disease and passed it on to the rabbits 好。那么这一句首先一个这个 it 啊。这个 it 是一个形式主语啊，那么真正的主语是后面这个 that 分句啊，这个 that 从句是真正的主语啊 ，that 什么什么 was found 啊，那么这个 that 从句啊，那么我们再看这个里面啊，那 there was a type of mosquito 啊，那么这个 which acted as the carrier of disease and passed it on to the rabbits， 这个呢是一个定语从句，对不对？那里面呢有两个谓语并列的 ，acted as the carrier of disease and passed it on to the rabbits， 两个谓语里面并列的。那么这个呢是定语从句，这个 which 就是指这个 a type of 这个 which 应该指这个 mosquito 啊，这个 mosquito 啊就 acted as 好，那么后面。So while the rest of the world was trying to get rid of mosquitoes, Australia was encouraging this one. 好。那么就是说这一句是一个时间状语从这前面啊 ，while the rest of the world was trying to get rid of mosquitoes 啊，那么 Australia was encouraging this one 啊，那么这里呢，this one type 啊，它是 one type a type of mosquito 啊 ，one type encouraging this one。这个是 one 就是指那个 a type of mosquito， this one type of mosquito 啊，然后呢 it effectively spread the disease all over the continent and drastically reduced the rabbit population 啊，这个是简单句啊，这是不是啊？这两个谓语并列的 ，spread all the disease all over the continent and drastically， 这个 and 连接的是两个谓语啊，两个谓语。然后 it later became apparent that rabbits were developing a degree of resistance, so that the rabbit population was unlikely to be completely exterminated. 好，那么这一句这个 it 又是一个形式主语啊。那么它的真正的主语是这个后面这个主语从句啊，这个是 that 引导的名词性的从句啊，做真正的主语啊。那么这个呢是 later became apparent 啊 that rabbits were developing a degree of resistance to this disease。那么这个名词性的 that 从句里面还有一句是状语从句啊 ，so that were developing a degree of resistance so that 啊，这个又是一个 so that 引导的结果状语从句啊。结果什么样？就是说 was unlikely to be completely exterminated 啊。后面 there were hopes, however, that the problem will come manageable 啊。那么这里这个 that 从句啊，这又是一个名词性的 that 从句啊。这个从句是什么？这个从句是同位语从句啊，这 hopes 啊，什么 hope 啊 ？That the problem of rabbit would become manageable 啊，这个 hope 啊，这 hopes 啊，这个是hope 的同位语从句啊。后面。Ironically, Europe, which had bequeathed the rabbit as as a pest to Australia, acquired this man-made disease as a pestilence 啊。那么 ironically Europe， 那么后面这个 which had bequeathed the rabbit as a pest to Australia 啊，这个啊。这个是一个定语从句，这是非限定的定语从句啊。Which had bequeathed the rabbit as a pest to Australia？ 这个 which 指什么？指 Europe 啊。这个定语从句是修饰这个 Europe 的，对不对？修饰 Europe 的。那么这个 Europe 怎么样 ？Europe acquired this man-made disease as a pestilence 啊。好，那么后面 ，A French physician decided to get rid of the wild rabbits on his own estate。And introduced 这个啊，那么这句是简单句啊。那么这里呢有一个不定式短语啊 ，decided to get rid of on his and decided and 那么啊 ，sorry， 这个不定式短语啊到这里啊，这个不定式短语到这里啊。这个呢是 decided 的宾语啊，这个不定是做 decided 宾语啊，这 decided to get off the wild rabbits on his own estate， 然后这个 introduced myxomatosis 啊，这个跟前面这个 decided 啊是并列的谓语啊，用这个 and 并列的，这两个谓语，一个是 decided 的，然后呢一个是 introduced 的啊，这是两个并列的谓语动词，并列的谓语啊 ，decided to 怎么样，然后呢这个 introduced 的这个两个并列的啊。It did not, however, remain within the confines of his estate 啊。这个是什么？这个是一个简单句啊。It did not， 这个 it 是指什么？是指这个 myxomatosis 啊，这个 disease virus 啊。这个 virus remain within did not remain in the confines his estate 啊。这个简单句啊。It spread through France, where wild rabbits are not generally regarded as a pest.But as a sport and useful for the supply, and it is spread to Britain where usually 好的意思，这句长了。那么这一句呢，就有两句句子主句构成的啊。这第一句句子到这里啊，这是第一句啊，这是第一句，它是 spread to France 啊 ，through France 啊。然后呢，第二句是什么 ？spread to England 啊 ，to Britain 啊。这个是到 Britain 啊，那么这两句句子呢，用一个 and 呢把它连起来的，对不对？并列起来的。那么我们先看这第一句，这第一句是 it spread through France， 然后呢，这里有一个 where wild rabbits are not generally regarded as a pest, but as a sport and a useful food supply。啊，这个呢是一个地点状语从句。就是这个 France 啊，这个 France 呢 ，wild rabbits are not generally regarded as but as not but 啊，那么这个是并列的 ，not regarded but regarded as 啊，这个 but 后面省掉的，省掉了 regarded generally regarded as sport and useful food supply 啊，好，那么这个是地点状语从句，对不对？好，那么后面这个 and 并列的，我们看这第二句，第二句也蛮长的，一直到最后了，对不对 ？And it spread to Britain。那么这里呢又有一个 where， 对不对？又有一个 where 从句啊，一直到最后，这个又是一个地点状语，前面一个地点状语，这里相应的也有一个地点状语从句，这个是对称的，对不对 ？Where wild rabbits are regarded as a pest, but where domestic rabbits equally susceptible are the basis of。那么这里呢，它有两句地点状语从句啊，并列的，用一个 but。并列了两个 where 从句，看到没有？两个用 where 说。那么我们先看这个第一个 where 从句 ，where wild are regarded as a pest， 这个简单句啊 ，regarded as a pest。后面这个 where， 后面这个地点状语从句啊 ，where domestic rabbits equally susceptible to the disease， sorry， are the basis of 这个也是简单的。那么这里呢有一个形容词的那个短语啊。Equally susceptible to the disease 啊，这个是修饰这个 domestic rabbits 啊，这个是做状语的，修饰这个rabbits 的啊。那么好 ，the question became one of whether man could control the disease he had invented 啊。 那么这一句啊，这一句实际上是简单句啊，简单句，但是呢，也不是简单句，sorry，不是简单句。但是呢，这里面只有一个限定性的从句啊，这一个限定性的句子，这是一句句子，对不对？这只是一句句子啊。这一句句子是这样的啊，就是说 the question 啊，这个是主语，对不对？这个是谓语 became， 对不对 ？One of 后面这个 whether man could control the disease he had invented， 这个呢是一个 whether 引导的一个名词性的从句啊。这个名词性的从句啊，是做这个介词 of 的宾语的，这个是一个宾语从句。这个 whether 在这里是是否的意思，对不对？所以呢，这个整个是一个宾语从句，做这个介词 of 的宾语的啊。Whether man could control the disease， 好，那么这个 whether 这个从句啊，宾语从句里面呢，还有一句从句 ，he had invented， 啊，那么就是说。He had invented 是一个定语从句啊，这个是修饰这个 disease 的啊，这个 disease man he had invented the disease 啊，那么这个里面的关系代词啊，关系啊是关系代词啊，这关系代词因为做 invented 的宾语，所以它可以省略，所以呢，它关系代词把它省略了。He had invented 就修饰这个 disease 的啊，那么我们来看这里面 it spread and it spread 啊。On the basis of profit furnish, the question became one of whether 好，那么这一句啊，这一句大家注意了，他用了一个用了一个过去时态啊，这个 question 啊 became 啊，你看到没有？这个 question became 啊 became 他用了主句用了一个过去时态，那么这个就是他这个 question 是过去的啊，就是说，但是现在其实这里面用过去时态，就是有点值得商榷啊，商榷。但是呢，这个课文我现在我在这个网上参考过来的啊。那么它既然上面它用了这个过去时态，那么我们就用这个过去时态啊。那么你说它这个句子一定有错，那也说不清楚。这个因为它完全是因为这个 question 是他那个时候的啊，不是现在。他写这个东西的时候，对不对？哦，对，错了，不是写这个东西，就是说当时时候发生了这件事情的啊。当时发生了这个事情，到 Britain 去了以后发生了这个灾难了，或者说当时发生了这几件事情啊，一个是澳大利亚的，一个是那个法国，一个英国的，都有发生这个类似的情况啊。那么这样的话呢，他有就引起了这个 question 啊。那么这样的话呢，因为这所有他描述的事情都发生在过去，所以呢，这个 question 呢，他用过去时态呢，也是讲得通的啊，也是讲得通的啊。那么，但是你这里如果用一般现在时的话，也是讲得通的啊。那么这个呢，就是说他具体那个作者怎么写了啊？这个问题不大。好，那么今天这课讲了，谢谢大家，再见。